Welcome everybody to this lecture. In this lecture, I will talk about the German banking sector and how the number of different banks developed over time. Due to the fact that we can see that the number of different banks is reduced over time, I also want to talk about the phenomenon of a shakeout, where the number of firms within one industry decreases significantly over a short period of time. The structure of this lecture is as follows: that in the beginning we'll talk about the empirical part, like I'll talk about the development of the different bank offices in Germany over time. Then we'll start to introduce some shakeout theories, and we will have a microeconomic view on this phenomenon. This figure stems from the Bank Office report published in 2017 from the Deutsche Bundesbank. And you can see here that the number of different credit institutions is decreasing over time. So when it comes to the German banking market, it's not the case that we talk about a booming sector. It is the case that the number of different banks in this market decreases. When it comes to the German banking sector, it is the case that three different banking types play a role. We have the commercial banking sector, we have the saving bank sector, and there is the cooperative sector. And when you disentangle the overall numbers with respect to these three different sectors, it becomes clear that this overall development is especially driven by the development of the cooperative banking sector. The number of the cooperative banking sector decreased significantly over the last 2 decades. When you have a closer look at the saving bank sector, it is also the case that the number of saving banks decreased over time, and it's not that clear-cut when it comes to the commercial banking sector. It might be the case that the commercial banking sector even increased. Let's compare the situation in 1990, in 2006, and 2017 for the three different sectors. Then you can see here that it is indeed the case that the number of credit cooperatives decreased significantly. Also, the number of savings banks decreased, but the number of commercial banks increased over time. In the last row, you can see the relative change in this time period, 1990 until 2017. It is the case that only about 25% of the credit cooperatives survived. 73% left the market in this time period. When it comes to the savings banks, this development is not as drastic, but it's the case that about 50% of all savings banks decreased in this time period. The number of commercial banks increased by 14%. Also, the number of branches decreased significantly over time. What is a bank branch? For example, when it comes to the Sparkasse oder Spree, it's a case that they have different offices located all over the town. Maybe it's a case that the Sparkasse oder Spree is running 25 different branches. So the number of these branches also decreased significantly over time, and it's a case that more than 50% of these branches decreased from the time period 1995 until 2017. So when it comes to the German banking market, it's indeed the case that the consolidation took place within the last 2 decades. And hence, I would like to talk about the driving forces which are driving this development over time. I would like to review some theories which can explain so-called shakeout. And a shakeout is one phenomenon which pops up in the so-called industry life cycle. In this figure, you can see a typical industry life cycle here for the US automobile industry. We can see here that the number of different firms within the US automobile industry increased in a very short period of time. Then it is a case that this reaches a peak, and then it is a case that the number of different firms decreased significantly in a very short time period. And we call this shakeout here, this phase in the industry life cycle where the numbers of firms decrease significantly over a relatively short time period is called a shakeout. Afterwards, a typical behavior in an industry life cycle is that the number of firms levels off afterwards. It's especially important to stress here that we talk about the industry life cycle. We are not talking about a product life cycle. So we are looking at the development of the number of different firms over time, the industry life cycle. And this is the typical pattern: a sharp increase of the number of firms, then the shakeout, and a leveling off in the end. So what can explain the shakeout? First of all, it is the case that this shakeout is not demand driven. So it's the case that it's not on the demand side that the demand decreases and therefore the number of suppliers decrease. When we look at the time period here, the shakeout takes place after 1910 or 1913, and the number of customers which are demanding a car increases in this time period. So we can rule out that this is demand driven. We will learn that it is technology driven, that something happens on the technology side or something happens on the cost side of the company. Let's have a look at the first shakeout theory, which is called the dominant design. Let's assume that before the shakeout takes place, there are 7 different firms and they are all producing with a different technology. So you can see here that we have these 7 different firms and the color symbolizes a different technology. In this time period, it is not clear which technology is the best one. The industry has just started and a lot of companies are founded and they are all producing a different technology because it's not clear which one is the best. But at some point in time, it becomes clear which technology is the best technology. And this is the green technology here. We assume that the green technology becomes the so-called dominant design. And the green company has not a problem to survive in the end because this green company here is using the right technology. Also, this blue company and that green company, they were producing with a technology which is close to the dominant design. So the difference between the dominant design and the technology picked by the blue firm or the dark green firm is not, the differences are not too large and therefore they are able to jump on the new technology. But this dark blue firm here, or this black firm, or this orange firm, or this red firm, they were producing with a technology which is far away from this dominant design, from this green firm, and they are not able to jump on the new technology because this would lead to a very heavy investment. And these companies are not able to stem this heavy investment. They are too far away from the optimal technology, and therefore these companies die. So due to the fact that only a few companies produce close to the dominant design, only a few companies survive the shakeout. The number of companies in the industry decreased significantly, and in the end, it is the case that the three survivors will all produce with the same technology. What is an example for a dominant design? An example for a dominant design is like the wind turbines. So you can see here that these wind turbines, they have all three wings. Yeah. This is the dominant design today. When you think about a wind turbine, you will have a picture in your head that it has to be a wind turbine with three wings. How did the dominant design look like in the year 1983? In the year 1983, there was one scientific project where they tried to create the largest wind turbine in the world. This project was called Grovian. It was a German project, Große Windenergieanlage, abbreviated with Grovian. You can see a picture here. And it's a case that this wind turbine had only two wings. So in the year 1983, the scientific community believed that the optimal design is a wind turbine with two wings. Only thereafter it became clear that there were some advantages in case that the wind turbine has three wings. And hence it becomes clear that also the dominant design can change over time. When these kind of changes take place, it might be the case that some companies are not able to stem the investment and to abolish the old technology and jump on the new technology, and they will die in the end. Let's have a look at a second shakeout theory. Here we assume that there are 7 companies producing with the same technology. But also then an innovation takes place, and this innovation has an effect on the cost structure of the company. They have higher fixed cost and lower variable cost. So in case that one company is able to invest, is able to jump on the new technology, it will be able to produce with lower variable cost thereafter. Also in this theory, it's a case that the number of players within one industry decreases significantly from 7 to 3. In the following, we'll look at this kind of shakeout theory where the number of market players decreases due to the fact that a new technology is available which changes the cost structure, and not all companies are able to adapt to the new technology, and therefore a shakeout takes place. In order to understand this shakeout theory, we have to perform a short microeconomic review. We have to go back to our microeconomic class and refresh the knowledge with respect to the market structure of perfect competition. In this graph, you can see the long-run equilibrium in the market structure of perfect competition. It is characterized by the relationship the price is equal to the minimum of the average cost. In this graph, you can see 3 different curves. One is the marginal cost curve, one is the average variable cost curve, and one is the average cost curve. Let's assume that in the beginning, the price is equal to P0. When the price is equal to P0, the company we are looking at will produce the quantity Q0. Why is that? Because in the market structure of perfect competition, it's a case that the company chooses a point where the price is equal to the marginal cost. Price P0 equal to the marginal cost. We are at that point here, and the company will choose the quantity Q0. What about the profit? The price P0 is larger than the average cost. Therefore, this line here from here to there symbolizes the profit per unit, and the profit per unit is positive. This is only the short-run equilibrium. In case that in the short-run equilibrium, one company makes a profit, it will be the case that all the different companies will make a profit, because one critical assumption in this market structure is that all the companies, they are producing with the same technology, and therefore all the different companies have the same cost structure. In case that this one company we are looking at makes a profit, all the different companies are profitable. Since the market entry is not restricted, it will be the case that some entrepreneurs will also found these kind of companies. They will start to produce, and therefore the number of players within this market increases, so that the price will decrease over time. The price decreases to P1. Still, the production Q1 is profitable. The profit per unit decreased compared to the scenario where the price is equal to P0, but the profit per unit is still positive. So some more companies will be founded which also enter this industry, and in the end it will be the case that the price decreases to the level P star. When the price decreases to the level P star, it's a case that the output quantity is equal to Q2. The price P star is equal to the minimum of the average cost. Therefore, the profit per unit is equal to 0. It is a case that this company does not make a profit anymore. In the long run equilibrium, it will be the case that the profit for the company is equal to 0. It's a case that no company makes profit anymore. In this graph, we were looking at one single company. Let's have a look at the market. So this is a long run equilibrium for the overall market. In case that the price is equal to P star on the market, the quantity large Q star will be demanded. You can see here is a downward sloping demand function, and hence the quantity Q star will be demanded in this market. How many companies will be there in this market? Each company is producing the quantity Q2. All the companies are the same, and all the companies are producing in the minimum of the average cost curve, the quantity Q2. How many companies can survive in this market? The first company is producing this amount, the second company is producing that amount, the third company is producing that amount. It is a case that about 5 firms will survive in this market, and each of these 5 companies is producing the same amount of output, and the overall quantity supplied by these 5 firms is equal to Q star. Demand is equal to supply. Great. So Now we have performed this refresher with respect to the market structure of perfect competition in the long run. The quantity Q2, which leads to a minimum of the average cost, has a special label, and the label is minimum efficient scale. The definition of minimum efficient scale is the minimum efficient scale is defined as that quantity of output which leads to the lowest average cost. So in this figure here, it is the case that Q2, this leads to the minimum average cost, and hence Q2 is a minimum efficient scale. The company needs to produce Q2 so that they have like an optimal cost structure. This is the end of the first part of this lecture. Please take a short break and review what we have done so far, and then we'll start with the next part within a few minutes.